Thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Allison Spillman. I am a proud mother of 5 students in the Albemarle County School. I have a first grader who she and her brother were adopted from the foster system a couple of years ago, and they're both in elementary school, 1st and 3rd grade. I have twins that are in 7th grade, and then I have a junior at Western. The interesting challenges that my 5 kids face and that we face as a family, I feel like is what kind of prompted me to put forward my application. My son, who was adopted, has a lot of trauma from being in the foster system, he and his sister, but also on top of that was diagnosed earlier this year with a pretty significant genetic disorder, which makes everyday life pretty difficult for him. And so he has a pretty extensive IEP, and I have spent a lot of hours advocating for him and for kids like him within the special ed program at his school. So that's kind of gives me an interesting perspective. And then one of my twins is a proud member of the LGBTQ plus community. And that's been really amazing for us as a family. Also presents its own challenges and has given me some interesting insight into what those students face. And then my junior in high school is smart and funny and outgoing, but struggles with mental health issues that were greatly exacerbated from the pandemic and remote learning, and having to navigate that. And so all of those things on top of my pretty extensive business background kind of made me feel like I might have something to offer to the citizens and definitely to the people that I would represent in Whitehall.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Spillman.
It's Mrs. I wish I was a doctor, but I'm not, so I don't want to take that title from anybody.
All right, Mrs. All right, thank you. All right, our first question will be asked by Dr. Acuff.
First of all, thank you for being here. You've started talking about this, but tell us why you're interested in being on the school board, and how do you intend to represent the residents of the Whitehall district?
Sure. Yeah, so I got into it a little bit. But yeah, I think that I kind of have my finger on the pulse right now of what is needed and what the challenges that are facing our families and our students and our teachers, because I do have 5 kids, and they're in all levels of school, elementary, middle, and high school. So it gives me a really interesting perspective on what's working and what's not working. And I also am very involved in the community, and that has allowed me to consider myself lucky to have many teachers and counselors and support staff as friends. And that has given me the opportunity to have an ear to what they're facing. And so all of those things, like I said, kind of when this opportunity came up, I thought, okay, you know, maybe now's my time, now that all the kids are in school, and I have the time and the capacity to devote to advocating for kids like my own, and that I could probably have a lot to offer. And so, you know, it's an interesting situation because it's not an election. And so, but with the intention that this isn't a short-term commitment, and if I'm lucky enough to be chosen, I would hope that it would, you know, continue on for a long time, knowing that, you know, I might be able to make a difference.
Thank you.
Okay, a follow-up question, Ms. Spillman.
Sure.
Based on what you just said, would you plan on running for the seat in November 2024?
That would be the intention, yes. I don't look at this as just a short-term, let's see how it goes. I think that it takes a long time to make a difference, and it takes a lot of hard work, and that would be the goal, would be to, if I was chosen, to make this more than just a 10-month commitment.
Okay, thank you. All right, Ms. Lee.
Tell us something that excites you about our strategic plan, Learning for All, and something that gives you pause for concern.
Good question. I think that, I've spent a lot of time reading over the strategic plan over the last few days. I had read it previously, but obviously in preparation for this. And I think that, the quest for equity and excellence, community, wellness, those things really excite me because that's what I want for my kids. And we moved back to Crozet in 2019 after having lived in Chicago and Scottsdale. Our youngest two were adopted from Arizona. And so I've had experience in other public school systems, and I have to say that my husband and I have been thoroughly impressed with the quality of teachers in these schools and the quality of families and how loving and accepting and welcoming people are, especially given the challenges that some of my kids face. So the fact that comes from the top and it comes from the school board and it is emphasized in your strategic plan that those are all the things that matter the most, and that's what we're all striving for. It's very apparent in the everyday life that our kids and our teachers and our parents are experiencing. I will say that having a child with special needs and a very extensive IEP and using a lot of resources and knowing that 13% of the student population have some sort of disability, I would like to see more effort put into those resources. And I think that the strategic plan, if you're talking about students thriving, and that's your number one goal, I think that it needs to encompass all of those students as well. And from a personal standpoint, I feel like there is some room for improvement.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Ms. Osborne.
So the board adopted an anti-racism policy in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
In what ways do you think we have been successful in implementing it? And in what areas could you help us improve?
I think that the anti-racism policy is fantastic in that, the majority of it is student-written, student-led. I think that that's wonderful because that's where it starts, is with our kids. And, I think that seeing the way that my kids interact with other kids and the way that, diversity is increasing in our school system and the amount of acceptance, especially after, the riots in Charlottesville and things like that, where, our area kind of got a bad name. That's not the impression that is given in our schools. And the level of inclusiveness that, as a white woman, it's hard for me to say that, but that I have seen in our community has been impressive. I think that the racial disparities in the reading scores are definitely pause for concern. I appreciated Dr. Haas's email when those scores came out, and I think that that's something that really needs to be, and I'm sure you guys are, are already doing that, is really looking into why did that happen and what can we do to mitigate that and close those gaps so that it's not just the upper class white kids that are performing well in our schools.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Alcaro.
Hi, Ms. Spillman.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you again.
Thank you. What do you see as the most important challenge facing public education in the next few years, and how should it be addressed? That's on a as a whole basis, and then how it impacts your family.
I think that we are, I think we're just now starting to see the true ramifications from the pandemic. I think that, there were the immediate effects, but I think the mental health issues that are really affecting our students because of that are really now just coming out. There's obviously learning gaps that took place. I think that, it's going to be a long haul of correcting and getting us back on track. Like I mentioned, my oldest son, he was entering high school during quarantine, which is a really hard time to be a freshman in high school and you're stuck at home. And so, he got off track, and we talk about it all the time. His path looks different now than what we thought that it was going to look like a few years ago. And that doesn't mean it's bad, it's just different. And I think that that's really important in public education, is that recognizing that there isn't a single path for one path for all kids to follow. Like, everybody has their own passions and their own strengths and their weaknesses, and the challenge in public education is really making sure that all kids are given the right opportunities to thrive, and that they don't just fall into a certain category or a certain box that makes us look good. It's what's going to make them look good, what's going to make them succeed, what's going to make them happy. And if we, as public educators, can provide them those opportunities, we're setting ourselves up for a much better society, and I think hopefully a less divisive society as well.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Spillman. Do you have any questions or any other things that you would like to address at this time?
Well, I mean, I don't think specifically. I think that you guys have a hard job, and I think that a lot of people, it's easy to be an armchair critic and to sit back and criticize, but I guess I would ask then, what is it that you're most proud of? Because a lot of people sit and criticize and want to point out things that, you may not be doing, but I think that there's a lot of things that are done really, really well, and I'd just like to know what, you're most proud of from serving on the board.
Board members, let's jump in first.
I don't know if there's a single thing, but my background's in public health, so I've, even before the pandemic, was advocating for more mental health support in our schools. So I'm personally very pleased with that. I think I am proud of our strategic plan. That doesn't mean we've accomplished what those goals are, of course, but I think we more explicit. We worked with a consultant, and we were told that no other school division that they had worked with across the country had, a central premise of anti-racism.
That's amazing.
As I said, we have a ways to go, and we can use input along the way, but I think that was important. I think it was important. Basically, where I'm going with this is I'm pleased that we've been trying to make our schools a welcoming place for all of our students, with our anti-racism policy, our transgender policy, with our mental health support. I think those are all necessary for children to thrive. I mean, it's not sufficient. I know we have a lot of work to do, but I think we've taken on those supports that a lot of school divisions haven't been able to.
Thank you. Yeah, I would say that having a child in the LGBTQ community that could walk in on the first day of sixth grade in a dress and makeup and feel confident and loved, and my husband and I were sitting in the car just saying, please let them be kind, and he came home and he said it was the best day, and people complimented me on my makeup and my dress. That's not nothing. That means something to those kids, and it means something to our family. So I would agree with you on that wholeheartedly.
I agree with Dr. Acuff that probably the transgender policy and our anti-racism policy are two of the things that I'm most proud of that the board has tackled or worked with. So
big things to tackle.
Yeah. Or do you have any other questions or any other comments?
I don't think so. Any other questions for me?
May I ask a follow-up question? I think we've got just a couple minutes.
Yeah.
I understand that you took over a struggling business.
I did, yes.
And that 5 or 6 years later, it was no longer in that situation.
Correct.
And it was sold.
Correct.
Can you tell us some of the lessons that you learned in that you might be able to bring to the board, whether
Sure.
it's in budgeting or other areas?
Yeah, and I'll be quick because I know I don't have a ton of time. So I took over a family business, which was a medical billing company. It was my parents' business. They were looking to retire, and it had been struggling for a long time, and it was large. We had 150 employees in several offices at the time, but there were a lot of just inefficiencies, operational inefficiencies in the business. And so jumped in and tried to look at where we could cut costs and improve efficiency, and really looked at all the different processes involved and what were necessary, what weren't. And so over a couple of years, we were able to turn the business around, and I was able to sell it in 2015 for a profit. And that allowed me to be able to take the time to focus on the adoption of our kids, which was by itself a full-time job. But yeah, I think I learned that one, running a business, that's good practice for running a family. I say all the time, I'm the CEO of my family now. But also, I learned a lot about working with people. With that many employees, I learned a lot about, listening first. And you can't solve anything unless you listen to all the sides, you understand the root of the problems and why people feel a certain way.